Hello, everybody!
Turn this up in my headphones, Charles.
Turning it up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I am ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy today, because today we are returning to an episode that we had left off, a part one last week. We said we were going to return with it this week, and here we are today, because Dylan, it is still Indie August.
Yes, it is. Hashtag Indie August over on Twitter if you want to participate in the fun that we're having over there. And we've got a lot more indie recommendations that we got from our call for recommendations that we had way back in late July in preparation of helping out with Indie August.
That's right. It's been a long time coming. I mean, this post has got a ton of recommendations on it. I mean, the engagement on this was really incredible. So we are going to do our very best to get to everyone. That being said, if we're going to be tossing a lot of recommendations your way in the next hour or so. So don't feel like you have to be taking all these notes down. We're going to be putting a link to the thread on the episode description, and we're going to be tagging everybody that left a recommendation. We're going to tag as many of the authors as well on our episode announcement over on Twitter. So be sure to check us out over on the FTF podcast with the number 1 at the end on Twitter so that you can see all of the fun that is going on over there. So Dylan, I don't know if we can wait any longer. We've got so many recs to get to. There's so little time. What do you say we just get right into the next recommendation?
Yeah, sounds good to me there, Charles. We're up to a recommendation from Maxime Jazz, at Maxime Jazz, who said at Bjorn Larsson's Storytellers and Children and Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar are Maxime's top 3. And Charles, these are 2 books that are coming up a ton. They came up for sure in our Indie Rex Part 1, and these are Bjorn Larsson's work and Crystal Matar's work has been getting just both of those authors have been getting so much praise on Twitter that it's definitely time to take notice.
Yeah.
I mentioned Legacy of the Brightwash. I read the first chapter of that one. It's in the self-published fantasy blog off in which I am a judge. So I'm expecting to be probably reading more of that down the line. And great things to say. And also Fiction Fans podcast has fantastic things to say about Crystal's work. So.
And, Maxime Jazz dropped this rec back in July, but even just today on my feed, today it's late August 17th here, and people are dropping the cover of this book. I recognize it now every time I see it. And it's certainly one of the more popular ones. And Crystal actually popped in to thank Maxime for leaving the recommendation here, which is also touching to see. And Storytellers and Children are 2 books that, again, have popped up multiple times that I'm very interested in checking out as well. So it's like you said, Dylan, once these get recommended a bunch of times, it's time to take notice. And I think Legacy of the Brightwash probably has the lead for most recs right now.
Yeah.
But, there's still so many more to go.
Oh, for sure, Charles. Yeah, we'll keep it rolling. And the next comment is one with just a ton of books listed. So I think we'll just read those off and give people the chance to check out the thread and learn more about those, because they're from Thomas Kane at Thomas M. Kane 11, who was nice enough to tag all of the authors there. So you could probably follow their page for more information. So Thomas listed Fantasy Planet series at SG Monet. That's SG Monet, author. Fires of Treason by Michelle Quirk. Erathos series by Rob Nugent. That's one that's been coming up a lot. And then we've got Silrith series by PJ Berman. I believe I guess that person doesn't have a Twitter account anymore because their Twitter account's not loading. But Season of the Plow by Luke Maynard. Empyrean series by M.K. Hall. Dragon Dreamer series, and that's Jenny S. Burke. And then we've got Angels and Demons by it's like J.C. Seal. So a lot of recommendations there. We had Rob Nugent stop by to actually recommend Tom's book. So Tom's an indie author himself. So that would be Rob Nugent, author of the Erathos series, saying, I'd recommend Tom's own Witches of Crannock Dale, one of my favorite novels of the last few years. So
wow.
Authors stopping by, supporting each other, and that's exactly what you like to see in this awesome community.
It's a beautiful thing indeed to see when all these, one of the best things about being a fantasy literature podcaster is that you get to be a part of this community, and it's awesome to see all these authors lifting each other up, and just the amount of support that we've seen on this thread has been really wholesome, and I'm just super honored to be a part of sharing all these people's works out there. So the fact that they're all supporting each other, it warms my heart, Dylan. It warms my heart.
Yes, that heart that has been widely noted on Twitter for never having allowed you to cry at a fantasy novel, Charles, but it is warm right now.
Yes, it has certainly been warmed by the community many times.
So then next up, we've got a recommendation that's given, looks like by the author. So this is, or perhaps by an account, it's Move Over Shakespeare Tales from the Baron, and that's the name of the account that posted it. I assume that's the author, and it's Billy J. Barnum. I'm trying to get close enough to read this over here.
Right.
And there's actually a trailer on here that they quote tweeted, which is pretty. I'm just kind of watching it. It's got this sort of scrolling text of all these compliments it's receiving. It's the most imaginative and thought-provoking book I've read in years. A++. And it's moving too quick for me. But a very kind review from an Amazon reviewer. So that's Billy J. Barnum's Move Over Shakespeare Tales from the Baron, which, clicking on that Amazon page, it's got 5 stars after 27 ratings. So,
all right.
Yeah, interesting one to check out on the thread for sure.
Yes, guys, go ahead and check that one out. There's so many here. You don't want to miss any of them. So be sure to check out the thread for all these links that these people are so kind to provide, and all these reviews, and you can see for yourself if it is for you.
Yes. Well said, Charles. So the next one that we have up here is from Darren Hanshaw, who's actually, from what I can gather, a Long Islander, Charles. From our old stomping ground where we grew up. And a Spiffbo 4 semi-finalist who came out and recommended, he recommended a different book, but I think good idea for us to give a shout out to Darren M. Hanshaw's The Engineer, Chronicles of Actaeon story. So that's who's stopping by, and Darren, who's at engineer7601, tweeted at us, check out Parasites by at many_writings. That's Matthew Samuels. If you fancy a weird cross between Sliders, Stargate, and Damnation Alley. That's
quite the cross.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Darren, for leaving a recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Darren, and shout out to all fellow Long Islanders.
That's right. All you Long Islanders out there, shout out.
Right. So then we've got a recommendation from Dorian Hart at Dorian Hart, who listed a bunch of awesome books by awesome authors here, who said, my faves include The Iconoclast by Mike Schell, The Half Killed by Quinby Olson, Chasing Graves by Ben Galley, Sword of Kaigen, Charles, by M.L. Long.
Yeah, that's been at the top of our TBR list for a while.
Yeah, we'll be getting to that one quite soon, I think. And
soon.
Speaking of Charles, there's a lot of people who think that might be the first book to make you cry. So.
Yeah, so many of our peers are saying that this is the one, that we have to read it, and that it is highly emotional. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Next up, we've got Orconomics by J. Zachary Pike, which was the winner of the self-published fantasy blog off SPIFBO in 2018, and I've heard it's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about it.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Sir Thomas the Hesitant by Liam Perrin.
I like the name.
Yeah, that is a great name. It sounds like it'd be funny as well.
Yeah.
And I see on Liam's Twitter bio, it says fantasy/humor/Arthurian. So I think that's something that would appeal to a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. And next up, we've got the Paternus trilogy by Dirk Ashton. And Dirk, a SPIFBO finalist and a fantastic Twitter presence. Really, really nice. And also a podcaster as well.
And also dropped in to say thanks to Dorian here on the thread, which is always lovely to see.
Yeah, that is always lovely to see. And that's one we've talked about this before, but it warrants saying again in this one is that it's so cool in this indie sphere that a lot of the folks, because they're responsible for their book in basically every sense of the word, including marketing and things like that, and just the community is so great and supportive and all this kind of stuff. You've got all of these authors willing to stop by and interact. So I've seen Dirk seems really, really nice and communicative on here, and I'm not surprised that he stopped by to say thank you. And next up, Dorian also recommended Dance, I hope I said this right, Macabre by Half Strung Harp is the Twitter handle for Laura M. Hughes. Nice. Yeah, it's a lot of great recommendations there, and all those folks are tagged. So if you check out the thread, you can follow along to their page to learn more.
Yeah, and keep a heads up on the FTF podcast, where we will most definitely be reading Sword of Kaigen once we wrap up the First Law universe, which should be within the month. We'll be wrapped up with the First Law universe, and then, this is a book, Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong, that I've been wanting to jump on for a long time. It's just we've made too many commitments with Joe Abercrombie first. We have to get through those, and then we will be free agents to go ahead and pick up Sword of Kaigen, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm pumped for that one. We've had a lot of recommendations to check that out, and SPIFBO winner, so really, really interesting. I've heard it described in very glowing terms compared to things like Avatar: The Last Airbender and stuff like that. So very exciting.
And we're such big fans of the Poppy War too. It gives me that because Poppy War is often compared to Avatar as well, and it's like similar to me in the terms of like the sphere of fantasy, and I'm curious to see like how Emma Wang's voice either compares or differentiates from Kwang's, considering they're in the same like realm of fantasy. I'm wondering if she'll go as hard as Kwang does, but from what I've heard, it sounds like she can write some pretty gut wrenching stuff. So
Yeah.
we'll see. I'm looking forward to it
Yeah.
greatly.
Me too. All right. Next up, we've got Leslie Ann Moore, who is at Leslie_Ann Moore, posting, I'm reading Terra Incognita by Mark Ferguson at the moment. Very intelligent and challenging sci-fi. Got a nice sci-fi rec in there, Charles.
Sci-fi shout out.
You're a fan of that.
Sure.
And I also enjoyed The Crown of Bones by Rosalind Breyer. Leslie continues. The Fires of Treason by Michelle Quirk, and the first two books of Mackenzie Austin's series. And yeah, I don't think they listed the name of the series. Or the Twitter handle is at the Panagia Tales. Maybe that's the name of the series.
We'll look into that. The Panagia Tales. Panagea. Like Pangea with a few extra vowels. That's my guess. I honestly, who's to say? But yes, the Panagia Tales. Pangea Tales.
Yeah, I'm following that over to the page to see if I can actually check. Yeah, the Panagia Tales. You're right there, Charles.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, good job.
Me.
And we actually had Mackenzie Austin, the author of the Panagia Tales, stop by there, and very nice message. Thank you so much, Leslie. That means the world to me. And then mentioned that they pre-ordered Skeins of Fate, which is Leslie Ann Moore's book, which is available now. So we've got, more awesome indie authors supporting each other, and we always love to see that, Charles.
Yes, we do.
Cool. All right. Well, next up is actually Michelle Quirk, who got recommended in the previous comment by Leslie Ann Moore, who came in with a lot of recommendations. I think there's another long list, so I'll invite folks to learn more by heading over to the thread and following along all the authors that Michelle's nice enough to tag. So Michelle said a few faves: A Heart Worth Healing, and that's by Cara Devlin. The Marked Princess by E.P. Staves. A Consuming Love by Kelly Miller. Stray Witch by Eva Alton. Corgan by Rebecca F. Kenny. Shadow Stained by Rachel Hobbs. Embracing the Dragon by K.L. Bone. And A Sea of Pearls and Leaves by Rosalind Breyer.
Wow. Have you heard of any of these before this recommendation, Dylan?
Some of these I think have come up before, and I'm recognizing the names, but Charles, you and I are still working to get ourselves more engrossed.
It's true.
Like Rosalind Breyer just came up for The Crown of Bones earlier, so we're recognizing multiple recommendations, which is always great to see. Charles, we've definitely got our work cut out to continue to get ourselves more engrossed in the indie community, and I'm excited. This is going to be super helpful.
I agree. Yeah, a lot of these recommendations, these titles, these authors are new to me. I do recognize some of these from previous recs in this thread, but it's good to see like we're starting to recognize some of these authors. You can start to see the network here of like who recommends what and names popping up over and over. It's a nice thing to see, and I'm not sure. Like, this is why I want to make sure people know, like when they are listening to this, that you gotta come over to Twitter and see what's going on because it's super fascinating. I would say if you're interested in getting into reading independent authors, which I would highly recommend, and I know Dylan and I have been dipping our toes in lately and have been taking on adopting more of a mission for our show to read more indie authors, and we've been doing a lot more of that this year than I have in my whole life. So definitely looking forward to that. But I mean, Twitter is such a great resource. You can reach out to these authors directly and get recommendations and find the book that's right for you. So it may seem like we're giving a long list of titles and authors, but it's like we didn't want to pick one book over another, and we just don't have time to properly pitch every single one. These episodes would be like 3 hours long, so we're just going to try and get through as many names as we can. Hopefully you recognize some names that stick out to you, and we'll point out some along the way. But yeah, just really again want to enforce that this community is super awesome, and the book community on Twitter I highly recommend, even if you're not in the fantasy literature space. Just as a fan, just as a reader, you can pop in and have a good time. So definitely check out a lot of these recs. There's some really nice people over here that are more than eager to share their writing experience and any information, anything you want to know about these books. They're available. So highly recommend checking it out.
Well said, Charles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, next up we've got a recommendation from David DeCero, who is at David DeCero, who's a booktuber. And
nice.
David recommended Demons Inc. by Clayton Snyder and Norilska Groans by Clayton Snyder and Michael Fletcher. Said 2 gritty fantasy noir tales that are so underrated. And so these ones, something interesting that I stumbled on is that at Wizards, Warriors, and Words, which is a podcast, it's actually the one that I mentioned Dirk Ashton is one of the co-hosts on, also has an episode where Michael Fletcher, who's a typical co-host there, as well as Clayton Snyder, who came on for a guest spot, talk about co-writing a novel through the lens of Norilska Groans. And it's an interesting listen. So can throw that out there for folks who want to get more of a sense of what that process was like. And I've heard great things about Norilska Groans.
Awesome. That's interesting. I hadn't made that connection, but I mean, gritty fantasy noir. I don't need much more of a compelling reason to check them out than that.
Yeah, exactly, Charles. So then next up, we've got it. I hope I'll say this person's name right. Cassie Offenthi, at Cassie Offenthi, who said, definitely recommend the Shendry series by E.P. Staves, who just came up earlier. So another repeat name, which is always a good sign.
Oh, yeah. Yes. The Shendry series. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
And next up, well, we had MD Presley stop by at MD_Presley. Yeah. And that's Matt. He stopped by and just kind of said supports this message, and also the use of Evan as a GIF. Like, I made a GIF of Evan Winter, who his success after self-publishing The Rage of Dragons has, I think, really made him one of the faces of self-publishing success. And if you do stop by our Twitter thread, hopefully some folks will appreciate my Evan Winter GIF. But thanks, Charles. Mm-hmm. Then I tried to then elevate The Woven Ring, which is MD Presley's book, and it's one that I'm looking forward to getting into. I do own a copy of that one, and I've heard a lot of great things.
Yeah, and we've been DMing on the side, and who knows, maybe something will materialize between us and MD Presley very soon. Who knows?
Yeah. It's certainly possible.
It's certainly possible, exactly.
Yes. All right. So next up, we've got a recommendation from Yellow Birdie at YellowBirdie721, who actually runs a awesome Discord for fantasy readers. And Yellow Birdie recommend 2 that have come up before, Sword of Kaigen and Pawn's Gambit.
Oh yeah.
That's Rob Hayes. Is
I
Pawn's
can
Gambit.
never not see Prawn's Gambit now after that exchange. Like it's forever altered in my brain. I don't know how I'm gonna ever correct it.
So for folks who maybe haven't listened to part one, where I think we discussed this in more detail,
Yeah.
we had a funny. So Rob Hayes is the author of Pawn's Gambit and extremely successful indie author. Hearing great things about his work. We had a funny exchange with him on Twitter where. I can't remember how it got started, but at some point we were making puns with his book's name, and I think I said Prawn's Gambit, and then he followed up by posting a photoshopped image of like all the characters on the front of Pawn's Gambit with
The book
shrimps.
cover. Yeah.
Like on the book cover with shrimps, like the animal
Yeah.
over there. Over their heads, and it was quite a feat.
Yes, and it has
very,
forever
very
altered
impressed.
my brain's quick recognition of the title. Now I just see Prawn's Gambit by Rob of the Haze, which is his Twitter name.
Yes. All right. Well, we know those are two awesome recs, and
We sure do.
appreciate you stopping by, Alberti. And
Yeah, thank you.
next up, we have Eric Balk at Eric Balk 4, who posted his own book, Assault on Devil's Den, Champion of Valor, with a description. Aging hero Pelagius has begun to question his abilities and contemplates hanging up the sword when someone attacks a small village and steals the inhabitants' souls. He sets out on a quest to rid the world of the attacker's soul-devouring master. We've got an interesting premise there.
Soul stealing.
Yeah.
Very fascinating. I've always found the themes around souls in fantasy to be very interesting. I'm always interested. Like when we read Emperor's Soul, I love that. This idea of what is a soul and can you create a soul? It was brilliant.
Yeah, no, it presents with a lot of interesting ways to have the magic system work and to explore some of these more almost spiritual, philosophical type things. So, sounds like a great setup there from Eric Balk's novel.
Yes, it does.
All right. Well, next up we have Raina Nightingale. That's at Arriere_novels. A few recent recs. Breaker by Amy Campbell. The Stars Wait Not. That's a great title there. So that's from Anne Wheeler. The Fires of Treason by Michelle Quirk, who we know from stopping by earlier and having their books recommended too. Deathborn by C.E. Page. Michelle stopped by to say thank you too here. That's very nice.
That is very nice.
Next up, we've got Lady Umu at M1Lu. I'm a big fan of and recommend the worlds created by Michael G. Manning and Jeff Wheeler, as well as Brian K. Fuller's Tries Moon Saga and D.W. Hawkins' 7 Sign series. Gotta love that alliteration there.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Craig Albuck at Devil Arc. If you want to read a series that screams Wheel of Time, Charles, you and I
I'm listening.
are currently in the midst of reading a series that screams Wheel of Time. It just so happens to be Wheel of Time.
Yeah, I was going to say, it just so happens to be.
But so this sounds like it'll be a great recommendation for fans of sprawling, epic fantasy, big worlds, and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you want to read a series that screams Wheel of Time, but is its own very unique story with incredible world building and characters, then read Melissa McPhail's Pattern of Light and Shadow. Start with Sephiroth's Hand. The magic system is on par with Sanderson. That's a lot of really high praise there. And
high praise indeed.
yeah, I'm seeing the book cover is very interesting. which Craig posted here. So
Mm-hmm.
sounds like a great recommendation. Melissa McPhail. All right. Next up, we've got a recommendation from Jordan is writing Travels in the Dark at Jordan Loyal Short. And Jordan says, just finished She Dreams in Blood, sequel to Michael R. Fletcher's Blackstone Heart. And they are both badass grimdark fantasy novels. And Charles, we know that when we did that episode on where to start with grimdark way back.
Yes.
And we looked at friend of the show, Mark Lawrence's list of most grimdark novels, and Michael Fletcher's work topped the list. So when we're hearing that, that a book by Michael Fletcher is badass grimdark fantasy novels, we're definitely going to listen. And you and I love grimdark, so the person writing the fan voted most grimdark is probably someone that would appeal a lot to us and our taste.
Yes, definitely have been wanting to read something from Fletcher for a long time, especially after his name's come up a whole bunch of times, the whole Mark Lawrence grimdark list, and this is just another reason why we should be planning to check him out sometime in the very near future.
Yes, exactly, Charles. And next up, we've got another list of a few authors here. So we'll just read those off and direct people to the thread again to learn more. Weave a Web of Witchcraft. I like that title. By Jean M. Roberts. Destinies and Keepers by Carl F. Brothers. Bishop's Crossing by... this person's Twitter name is Stories by Dawn. So, and they're tagged at Orclad. So yeah, check that. Yeah, check that out to learn more. All great reads, or for romance crime caper, The Hook by Catherine Morrison. So yeah,
Let me a good caper.
Yeah, definitely. So then next up, we've got Nathan Klembara at nclem34, who said Code of the Communer by Kai Greenwood. It has this wonderful classic fantasy atmosphere while being something completely original. And I've seen Nils, who's at Nils Reviews it who is the... She describes herself as social media empress at the Fantasy Hive. So runs awesome Fantasy Hive social media accounts, which is just a great conglomerate of reviewers that does awesome posts. And Nils, she has been a huge proponent of this book by Kai Greenwood, who you can find at Lost Dunedain. And Kai is, I think, very inspired by Lord of the Rings, a noted huge fan of Tom Bombadil.
Oh,
so
right.
You Bombadil fans out there,
you
gotta get out there and support. Yeah, so this wonderful classic fantasy atmosphere that Nathan describes sounds very in line with what we'd expect from Kai, and we know a recommendation that comes with Nils' seal of approval is a recommendation from us as well, even if we haven't gotten the chance to read that one yet.
Well said, Dylan. Yep, all you Tom Bombadil fans, get out there. Check it out.
All right, Charles. So let's keep this one rolling. We got another one of these lists that will direct people to thread because it's a long one. It's from Dinosaurs United at History Profiles. And it said Refraction by Terry Geo, Dinosaur Dystopia. And you want to pay attention when Dinosaurs United is recommending a dinosaur themed book. And that's by James Puslosny. Next up, we've got Dragon Spawn Chronicles by Dawn Ross. And then We've got 3001 by Glee_right, and that's Ginger Lee. And then we've got Welcome to the Punk Horns by Benjamin Bradley, and Whatever Happened to Little Jackie by L.M. Ford. And those span the gambit, from what I can tell, from like science fiction to mysteries to fantasy and romance. And Dinosaurs United was nice enough to delineate that in their comment. So yeah, check that out, and you can follow up on the ones that seem interesting too. Yeah,
definitely check it out, guys. There's some really interesting titles in this mix here, and some really interesting author profiles as well over on Twitter, so definitely check it out.
Yes, that's a good idea. So, Charles, how we doing on time? Because I'm starting to think we're not going to get to all of them when I'm looking at all of these replies.
Right, we're hitting at about 35 minutes right now, I would say, by my guesstimation. And there is just a sea more of these, an absolute sea. So many wonderful indie author recs to go here. So little time, but Dylan, I'm going to leave it up to you. I think we're going to try and do one more. There's still one more week after this of Indie August, and we're going to try and get some more book recs in next week, and then we'll just have to call it after that. So it's up to you, sir, how far you think we've come. You know, I still think there's definitely more than enough to do another episode. It's gonna put it on you as the social media guru here, as the one who guides the ship over on Twitter. I will leave it in your hands. You have my absolute support.
Okay, well, if we are gonna do another episode, I actually think that episode would be probably similar length to this one. Just looking through the Rex, right?
I mean, we managed to do about 22 posts that were of people that had drops recommendations, and they all recommended multiple authors. So we've easily gone over like 50 book recommendations today.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Which is a pretty good pace. And guys, what I hope for this episode is that it just doesn't read like us reading book names and authors over and over and over. I want to stress the point here that this is a very large community full of very passionate individuals who have put their heart and souls into creating these works of art. And there's rarely in this world an intersection of like art and accessibility to the artist, and the fantasy literature community. These self-published authors are such a incredible group of people, and we're doing our best to represent as many of them as dropped by on our Twitter thread. This is the most book recommendations we've ever had for a call like this, and we do them all the time here on the FTF podcast, and this one is like triple the second most recommended we've ever had, at least. So it's like it's been a lot to get through, but we are more than happy to do it, and we just want to make sure that you guys go over to Twitter, and there's a link to this post that you can see where we will have the specific authors and reviewers that were mentioned today in that, and then we'll also have a link to the original thread that has everything. So if you follow all these authors, you will be put right in the center of a beautiful community. So I highly recommend checking them out, giving as many of them a follow as you like. Anyone that's writing something along the lines of a fantasy book that you're interested in. I mean, we've crossed the gambit from like urban fantasy to humor to classic fantasy to Sanderson-esque. Like, there's something for everybody here. So definitely take your time to comb through this and find the indie book that's right for you.
Yeah, well said, Charles. So... Yeah, I don't know how do I add to something as well as that, but yeah, I guess I'll just say thank you to everyone who stopped by the Twitter thread, because you're the ones doing the work here. We're mostly just reading through your comments and seeing if we have anything to add if possible. But this is really credit to all the wonderful folks on Twitter who came out to support indie authors and play a role in Indie August. And we're hoping to help do our part here too. But thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you to everyone that dropped a review. It means so much to us that you guys came strong for the Indie Recs. Like, if there was going to be a recommendations post that was going to blow up this big, I'm super thrilled that it's the Indie Authors recommendation.
Yeah.
So thank you all for that.
Yeah.
And with that being said, Dylan, it sounds like we're wrapping it up for today. Anything else we'd like to say before we play that sweet, sweet outro music?
No, I think it's just time to get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping. I hope some of you folks check out some of these awesome indie recommendations.
Well said. Let's get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening to yet another very special episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. If you like what you heard today, if you want to check out some of these indie author recommendations, follow us over on Twitter at the FTF Podcast with the number 1 at the end, or on Instagram at the FTF Podcast. It's the best way to reach us. It's the best way to interact with us. It's the best way to follow up on all these indie author recs and then follow and have conversations with those indie authors. Guys, it's a great community. Highly recommend joining and being a part of it. Now, Dylan, if they want to support the show even more than liking, following, engaging with us on social media, and they just so happen to be listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast. Just find that Friends Talking Fantasy page on the Apple Podcast app. Click the Friends Talking Fantasy page. Scroll down past all those episodes until you start seeing stars. Once you're seeing stars, the optimal number of stars to click in order to support the show would be 5 of them. If you have a little bit of extra time, then writing a review is super helpful for a podcast like ours. But just listening is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that.
Just listening, guys. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. Go check out an indie author today. And until next time, guys, go forth and conquer, friends.